So we'll come back to that. But we've got to talk about The Guardian, because this is the funniest story of the day. This awful history must reinforce our determination to expose racism, injustice and inequality. That's from Catherine Viner, the editor-in-chief. They basically worked out that the man who founded The Guardian was a bloke called John Edward Taylor, who was a journalist and cotton merchant, very much like myself, who founded the newspaper in 1821 and borrowed money from some other Manchester businessmen who were, surprise, surprise, involved in the cotton business, because in the north of England at that time, that was pretty much the business to be in. That was where the money was. And that was where the money was. But, of course, they also had connections to slavery in parts of the US, South Carolina and Georgia, and also in the Caribbean. So they're going to spend 10 million quid, apparently, from the Scott Trust to invest it in parts of the Caribbean and parts of Georgia and parts of South Carolina in a way to make sort of reparations for what they did. I mean, it's kind of mad.
Well, so The Guardian has just discovered that it's actually quite an old institution. And therefore goes back to a time when anybody with money would have had some kind of connection with the slave trade.
Yes.
I mean, it's not...
But I mean, most newspapers have an investigations department that investigates stories about other people as opposed to their own organisation. You know.
But also, it's not a secret. It's not a surprise that the Guardian might have had, or the founders of the Guardian in 1820s might have had some kind of connection to the slave trade. I mean, the point is, if you know your history, the Guardian actually supported the Confederate side in the US Civil War because of this cotton trade.
Okay, so they would support actual supporters of slavery then.
Well,
because
indirectly,
the Confederates, were quite keen on slavery.
That was the big issue in the US Civil War.
So they've got a whole spread in the paper. Owner of The Guardian apologises for founders' connections to slavery. They talk about setting up something called Cotton Capital, which is a new journalism project to explore the findings of how transatlantic slavery shaped Manchester. I mean, you know, there's some government business going on here, which I would have thought might be a bit more important.
A bit more relevant.
I mean, it's a bit onanistic, isn't it?
I think there might be better uses for £10 million.
Also, if you were one of those sad individuals who gives them money, because they're always begging for it on their website, please support us in our fine journalism.
Yeah, you discover it's all going to go to some charity in South Carolina.
Yeah, where they've probably got more money than we've got. Yeah. I mean, I find it very odd. Oh, well, never mind. I've always thought maybe they should move out of journalism altogether, get back into the cotton business. Maybe they'll be better at that. Anyway, let's talk about Scotland. Hamza Yusuf.
Scotland,
Scotland has really gone down the pan, hasn't it, recently, politically?
Well, it's very interesting because everyone says, oh, well, it all fell apart as soon as Nicola Sturgeon stood down. But actually, the reason she stood down was that it was falling apart. Yes. It's just behind the scenes and nobody really noticed. And actually, the SNP's extraordinary discipline held right until the moment she stood down. Right. You know, obviously there were tensions behind the scenes, but we didn't really know very much about them. And then they exploded out into the open with quite a bitter leadership campaign, with Kate Forbes really having a go at Hamza Yusuf for being useless at every department he'd
Which
run.
Seems to be a universal kind of belief that he hasn't been great. I mean, he's done for speeding while he was Transport Secretary. I know that's a bit anecdotal, but it's not a great look, is it?
No, but waiting lists went up when he was health secretary.
Well, the NHS in Scotland,
the trains didn't run on time, is what Kate Forbes said when he was Transport Secretary. Right. So he's and you know, there's that whole ferries business. I mean, the SNP's record as a domestic government in Scotland has been pitiful. And
well, they've shattered their own kind of image, haven't they?
Yeah,
really.
and because yes, I mean, Nicola Sturgeon was able to sort of put off the moment of reckoning by just saying, well, you know, look, we've got independence just around the corner, and now you know, as it was becoming evident that wasn't going to happen, her position just became weaker and weaker, and now. And now they've really got to regroup. And now this, and it looks as though his first sort of move to appoint his deputy has been roundly criticised as well, because he's basically pulled in Shona Robertson, who's a close friend of Nicola Sturgeon, so it's back to the old days. And the architect of the gender recognition bill. And he's also said he's going to continue with that, which was clearly a mistake, and which clearly finished her off. Public opinion in Scotland is opposed to. And not only that, but even in the SNP, they lost 40,000 members, largely due to the fact that they didn't support it. Yeah, well, Well, we don't know quite why they would have lost those members, but I mean...
Well, there's no other explanation, really, because to lose that many people over such a short period of time, unless they didn't exist in the first place, heaven forbid, you know, there's no other way of saying what happened, really.
No, I mean, that leadership election was the best possible result for those of us who want the country to stay together. And actually also the best possible result for Keir Starmer, because I think, you know, Labour are the obvious alternative to the SNP in Scotland now. I mean, briefly under Ruth Davidson, when Labour was on its holiday from reality under Jeremy Corbyn, briefly the Tories were a possible alternative, but now Labour are roaring back.
Quite a decent sort of figure, isn't he?
Well, he's a very impressive, very impressive leader. Yes, and I think he can really make inroads. And, you know,
are you talking about in Westminster or in Holyrood as well?
Well, Westminster is quite important because, you know, the next general election is the next big test. And if Labour can pick up a lot of seats in Scotland.
Well, Labour used to have 48 seats in Scotland, and without those, they could never really form a proper government.
It made it much harder. Yes.
Yeah. So if they can get even half of those back, that would be something. But one of the things that he did was he, as you say, he downgraded Kate Forbes. He offered her a crappy job in the new administration, which she immediately rejected.
Said, "Get lost."
And then, as I say, he's appointed this woman who, by all accounts, is as useless as he is, because the general trend of what I was watching on political comment yesterday was that, you know, this is a party, a coalition of the untalented. You know, which is a sort of play on what they'd done before.
Well, I mean, you know, Scottish politics is quite a small pool of talent.
Yeah.
And you know, the extraordinary thing about Nicola Sturgeon was how you know, she was head and shoulders above all the others.
Sure.
In that small pool. But I mean, it turned out that she was a good communicator, but she wasn't very good at anything else. Apparently she wasn't very good at the strategy of winning independence.
Well, one of the things that was said about the way she ran the government was that it was such a small group of people that it became completely insular and cult-like. And even Kate Forbes, who was the Chancellor, didn't know what policy was because they didn't include her in the meetings.
That's right.
And that's kind of mad, isn't it?
Yeah, and Kate Forbes is one of the few other people of real talent and ability in Scottish politics. I mean, Anna Sarwar, I think, is another one. But the SNP didn't go for her because of her complications.
Yes. Finally, we're told the Lib Dems are launching their campaign for local elections today.
I thought they launched it already. Well, you get so confused, Mike, with these sort of pre-announcements.
Yes.
So if Ed Davey hasn't said it already, I think I know what
you probably know these about.
I know what he's going to say.
I've been alerted to it.
He wants 8,000 more doctors, which has got nothing to do with local elections, of course.
Is he not well? No, apparently one of the things they always do is they do some really stupid stunt. And last year I think they did something like knocking down a blue wall.
They did, yes.
And it all goes a bit viral. So we're kind of on the lookout for what they're going to come up with this time to see if they can outdo Ed Miliband. And I'm now going to start the countdown because if there is to be an election, I'm going to every time you come in now, I'm going to ask you when you think it's going to be.
What, the general election?
Yes.
That's October 2024.
Okay.
October next year.
October 24. We've got enough time to get a new tent, ladies and gentlemen, and put it down on College Green. We'll see if we can do that. John, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.